All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here this afternoon. This first panel is going to be discussing the natural intersections between the private sector and the public sector. This is, I think, an important conversation to have, especially now as we go into a post-COVID world, but it was important prior to that, especially with municipalities always being cash-strapped. So today we have a variety of speakers from around the South Bay in both of those sectors, and what I'd like to do is introduce each of them, have them tell us a brief snippet about themselves, and then we'll get into a conversation and some Q&A. So why don't we start with Alan Sanford, who is my first person up on my screen.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. My name's Alan Sanford. I've been at the intersection of hospitality, music, and technology for the past few decades. Recently started Beach Life Festival down in Redondo Beach. Have seven now locations on the hospitality side, and have worked with I think every South Bay city in some private public capacity before, so I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Mayor Butts.
James T. Butts, third-term mayor of the city of Inglewood, former Inglewood policeman, left as a deputy chief, Santa Monica Police Chief for 15 years, an assistant general manager for the Los Angeles Airport System in charge of counterterrorism and public safety, and then returned to Inglewood as the mayor. I mentioned that because I was with Inglewood when they had the Lakers, the Kings, and the racetrack, so that was the alpha. And then when I came back, it was the omega. Everybody left, and now we're moving towards the alpha again, thanks to Jason and other friends of his.
Great. Alan Pullman.
Thank you. I'm Alan Pullman. I'm the founder of Studio 111 RDC Architects. So we're about a 150-person firm located in downtown Long Beach. And I also serve as the board chair for DLBA, which is the Downtown Long Beach Business Improvement District.
Fantastic. Jason.
Thanks for having me today. Jason Gannon, Managing Director of SoFi Stadium in Hollywood Park, home of Los Angeles Rams, the Chargers, Super Bowl coming up next year, many more events, and located in Inglewood. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mayor Boyles.
Thanks, Christian. Father of five, most importantly, I'm the mayor of El Segundo for 3 years, been on council for 5 years. And before that, I was the chair of economic development. I got to work with great people like Kelly Cheeseman of AEG and the Kings. And I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I've got a couple hundred employees in 4 states in various different industries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Kelly.
Thanks, Christian. Mayor Boyles is going to make me feel guilty if I don't say I'm a father of 2 to start. Kelly Cheeseman with the Kings and AG Sports. I've been with the company for 20 years now. So back to, pretty close to us, just coming into downtown LA. Been with the company since we were about 250 employees to about 25,000 employees worldwide. So been doing a lot of different projects around the city, from the South Bay to El Segundo to, LA, all over the place. And, look forward to being on the panel with all you guys.
Thank you. All right, so let's start here. What do each of you, and we can do this in any way you want. So clearly just either start speaking or raise your hand. But what do each of you see as the necessity, especially in now a post-COVID world, or even though we're not quite there yet, but heading that direction, for the interplay and collaboration between the public and the private sectors? And you each have unique experience, so by all means.
I'll go if you want.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, when I talked about the alpha and the omega, when I came to Inglewood, we had the Lakers, the Kings, 43,000 people a day at Hollywood Racetrack, 60 concerts a year, and Inglewood was doing pretty good. I left to go to Santa Monica. They had just redone the 3rd Street Promenade to capture the nightlife that left Westwood when Karen Toshima was killed in a drive-by in 1986 in Westwood by the Crips. But Santa Monica had a poorly managed homeless situation. And so that was part of my task, was to deal with the gangs that were selling drugs in the parks, the occupation of the parks with homeless, and a lot of homeless drug dealers. And we did a magnificent job. We cut the crime rate 64%. And along the way, the Third Street Promenade became just a world-renowned place to visit when you came to California. Spent time in the city of Los Angeles at the airport, a proprietary vehicle that had mega sums of money, and then became mayor in Inglewood. When I came back, the Kings were gone, the Lakers were gone, the racetrack was down to crowds of 1,000. We had the Sizzler and the Big Donut, and Norm's had left. And so we only had the Sizzler and the Big Donut left. And so one thing I learned along my travels is that cities that depend on their indigenous sales tax and property taxes will struggle with every recession. Now, Inglewood was buffered from that because we had entertainment. And so that was the first thing I did, was seek out Madison Square Garden, and we worked out a deal where they renovated the Forum, purchased it, and we gave an $18 million redevelopment loan, the last of the redevelopment money that we had. The state was coming to get it anyway. And people said, no one will come to Inglewood, too much crime, too much poverty. And they were wrong. After a year, it was the #1 concert venue in the state of California, #2 in the country, and #3 in the world for booked events. Along the way, met Stan Kroenke, and he developed an interest in this mega acreage that was supposed to be developed into a modest retail, office, housing development by the Hollywood Park Tomorrow project. And he ended up making a deal, entering a joint venture, taking over their entitlements, expanded those entitlements, and we had a measure to allow a football stadium, because it was already a football stadium contemplated in development agreement, but we had a signature gathering campaign, and the council adopted that. It had enough signatures, and we were off to the races. From there, we talked to the Clippers. The Clippers will break ground probably in a year. And so I say all this to say that even before we have started to collect revenue from ticket taxes, parking taxes, because COVID hit us, just as Jason did this magnificent job of finishing that beautiful edifice, the attraction of the city has really buoyed us. We only ended up about 1.8 million short in revenue this year. And so my experience from Los Angeles, Inglewood, and Santa Monica is that there's a big intersection between the public and private. And most people think that cities are provide for public safety, recreation, libraries, and infrastructure renewal. But the fifth thing, you have to create an environment, I feel, that encourages economic development and growth, because that's where jobs come from. When I came back in 2010, our unemployment rate was 17.5%. Pre-pandemic, in April of 2019, when the pandemic started, in 2020, April of 2020, we were down to 4.7%. Went from the highest unemployment rate in the state of California to the lowest unemployment rate for a minority majority city in the country. So there's a big intersection.
Yeah, and if I just add on to Mayor Butts, I know, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of this project going back to 2013, and the world looked a lot different than it does today. But I think from a developer perspective, you look at the Hollywood Park project and 300 acres on the west side of Los Angeles, and just from a pure development perspective, it was an incredible opportunity. But then to have, obviously a football team opportunity with the Rams at the time, and to do something really special, but there's certainly an amount of risk from a development perspective, but also just really an understanding of the local community and the government was really important, I think, from a development perspective, and ultimately the trust to know that, that we could pursue something, and that we would be doing it in partnership with the local community in a lot of different ways. And so Obviously, right now, I mean, we've opened a building, but there's so much more to do, right, to welcome really the public. But it really started for us was having faith that we would be able to execute on what was and is an incredible vision to build a world-class, global sports entertainment destination. That is Stan Kroenke's destination, and without having the faith and trust in the local government, I'm not sure that is something that could be a possibility today.
Alan Pullman, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at maybe a more granular scale, smaller scale, one of the things that we're going to struggle with, post-pandemic is small businesses, which have really suffered, especially in our sort of main streets. And all of our towns have main street districts, business districts. And one of the public-private partnerships, I guess, I'm involved in, but I'm also looking towards as part of the solution is, business improvement districts, merchant districts that kind of bring in some of the city resources, but then really supply with the energy, the entrepreneurial energy of businesses to market themselves, to rebound, to rethink about placemaking. I know that Mayor Buss talked about Santa Monica. They have a really robust, downtown bid, which is really important for managing and doing the services that cities can't always get to, clean and safe, really important. Public ambassadors, things that are really going to draw people, marketing campaigns. And I think those are really ways that we can help these main streets, which have been sort of decimated by this pandemic, rebound. I think it's going to be really important for a lot of our cities.
Well, let me go from there to, I want to go to Alan and then Drew. Alan, so you have a variety of restaurants in the beach cities, right? I think all 3 beach cities. And you are actively engaged in a bid, to Alan's point, right, in the Riviera Village. Talk a little bit about it from your perspective, and that integration and intersection between you and the local communities that you're in from a small business perspective.
Yeah. So, generally pre-COVID, people, when you say the word public-private partnership, you're meaning more of the big boys, right? More of the big stadiums and these big development deals. But I look at the private-public partnership word now as more of the government enabling small businesses to right now survive. But very quickly, I think that city governments are going to have to get into a recovery mode. And they're going to have to do that in parallel with, the pandemic's not over. The RVA down in Redondo Beach, without that RVA, we would not have been able to do what we did so fast. We built 17,000 square feet of parklet within, 3 days. We bypassed most of the coastal commission red tape. The city was great to work with, but really it was the city just enabling, getting out of the way and saying, just go, and leaving small business to work the details out. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, that single-handedly saved, I would say, 15 to 17 businesses down in the Riviera. I had experience across the whole South Bay. Torrance, we have a place, Hermosa, Manhattan. And I can tell you that the bid in Redondo was the quickest to act, and I think is looking from a community standpoint, has really enabled those businesses to work. So moving forward, what I would love to see from a public-private partnership perspective is enable the businesses to continue to recover, and even when the pandemic's over, to kind of to start thriving again, right? And to let businesses contemplate the things that previously were never even on the table. So hopefully city governments can hopefully this has opened their mind to trying new things, and hopefully some of those things stick.
So Drew, let's go to you, because you're the mayor of a city that is in many ways reinventing itself, right? In the Sleepy Hollow area and stuff like that. And then we can go to
Smoky Hollow. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. It's sleepy to me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Not anymore, man. Not anymore.
Yeah. So talk about that, because I think this is all.
How did we get that,
Well,
Drew?
I think, first of all, a couple stats. This is interesting. So I did some math recently, and without the help of my staff, I might add, but we have 10 million square feet of commercial office in El Segundo. And to put that in perspective, that's on 2 square miles. Our town is only 5 square miles, but our town also has a budget of 70 to 80 million in general fund, plus our water and other enterprise funds. And the reason that happens is we realized back when I was the chair of economic development, over 98% of our town's general fund revenue comes from business, directly and indirectly. Property taxes, we get 6%. I think Redondo gets what, 12 to 15? I know Manhattan Beach gets 15 of the LA County property tax allocation. We get a tiny sliver. That's back from when things were indexed in the 70s. So we've, I think, always known in El Segundo that aerospace, we're the hub of aerospace for the world. We're the hub, I hate to break it to you, Jim, we're the hub of professional sports. We have AEG, we have the Kings, we have the Lakers, we have Premier Lacrosse League, a startup. We have a new rugby club in town, LA Gilantini, sorry. And possibly one other I can't talk about, but we have a lot of momentum. And I think for us, we've had an economic development council forever. So Alan, I think, you guys, I saw what you guys did in Redondo. It was amazing. We took a little different approach. We don't have a bid. We've been talking about it for years and weren't able to get momentum. I think this will be the leverage point for us to say, we need a bid now. It's worked in Redondo. I mean, we were able to stand up because we're a smaller city. We had things shut down on the street and tables, I would say arguably before any other city in the South Bay, because it's easier for us to manage and it's 2 blocks. It's simple. It's not Manhattan Beach with the slopes. And so I think for me, when I think about your comment earlier about COVID, Christian, and what's going to be different, I think it boils down to 3 things. One is innovation. Government cannot innovate well. We got a reprieve or a hall pass, and Jim knows this. When COVID hit, the rules changed. We could throw the rules out the window for a little bit of a minute. You know as well, Christian. So we had an opportunity. I keep forgetting you're an elected official, my colleague, but you're the moderator. So, but we had an opportunity to say, let's close off the streets. Well, guess what? The public loved that. They loved it in Redondo. They loved it in Hermosa, Manhattan, El Segundo, Inglewood, everywhere. So now you've got people going, let's keep the streets closed. Do we really need 4 streets on Main Street in El Segundo? Of course we don't need 4 streets in Main Street. And by the way, we tried going to 2 years ago under one of my predecessors and everyone outcried. But now is the time to do that, to innovate. So private public gives us a better ability to innovate, especially with technology, because government's not generally good with that either. It gives us more financial stability because we have revenue streams coming in that we all will desperately need now that our budgets are down and that we're all facing pension structural deficits for the next 4 to 5 years because of CalPERS returns. And the third thing is it gives us access to capital. So we don't have to go out and get bond money. I think, 8 years it took us to get Top Golf across the finish line. We're breaking ground in 2 weeks on PCH. 8 years. Well, that is a PP3. I mean, P3, we've got a municipal golf course that they're going to spend a couple $1 million to improve for us, put up lights, make it better, improve the course, improve the short game practice area. And they're going to put up a driving range that we're going to get $1 million plus lease for, plus a share of food and beverage. So we're in the good of about $2 million a year delta between where we were and where we're going to be as a city, just by way of that deal. And even that was incredibly difficult. We had some really cool concepts. One, Alan, you put forth, I loved your amphitheater idea. So I think that's what's going to be different, Christian, is I think it's going to open our eyes, hopefully, in government to say, let's do more of this. Let's embrace some change and innovation, to Alan's point. So we're not just doing the same old thing all the time. Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's okay. Kelly, let's go to you because, you guys have invested, into El Segundo, but not only that, you have really become community partners throughout much of the South Bay. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, you guys got my head spinning because I was thinking back through 20 years and all the different projects that we could speak about right now, from the impact that Staples Center's had on revitalizing downtown LA and all the things that went into that, and the impact in the small businesses and the community and stuff there. But I want to focus maybe more on some of the small things recently that are more community based, Christian, because I think we're some of the best examples that I think have impact on the community. Just thinking of Mayor Boyles and his team, during COVID here, our rink, our facility at Toyota Sports Performance Center in El Segundo, we traffic about 1.3 million visitors a year. To put that in perspective, and a lot of people don't really, equate that number, but 1.3 million visitors a year is right below the Guggenheim in terms of traffic. So that's a lot of families and kids and people that were impacted by COVID that can no longer participate in the recreation that they wanted to do during COVID. Through the middle of the summer when things were decently okay. We were on track to probably have one of our best years ever in terms of traffic outside of birthday parties and things like that, and operating safely. And unfortunately, we had to shut down for obvious reasons, and we're happy to do that and make sure we did the right things. But coming out of it here, and as we got towards Christmas time, we were like, what can we do? Like, people are really, our customers, our clients, our kids are really getting impacted. And we're like, you know what? We've had our outdoor holiday rinks around LA for years. We've got all this. It didn't make sense to operate those because typically they're driven off of a lot of traffic. And let's put a rink in our parking lot, and we can get a lot of our kids re-participating at Toyota Sports Center and El Segundo. But there's tape to go through on that, and the city team came together and said, hey, what do you guys need, and helped us make it happen. And that was a perfect case. And now the things, booked through March right now, and we just reopened it this week. And it's a creative approach to getting people reactivated in a time that is really important. Like this recovery stage, like there's this middle ground. Like we've had this great announcement this week that kids are going to be able to go back to school here soon on the majority in the county. But for those of us that have kids, we've been having these discussions with our kids, and it's tough, and to give them that balance in between here is going to be important. Another example that comes up, and I'll call this a bit of a humble brag, but dealing with the South Bay cities back in 2014, when we won our second Stanley Cup, we wanted to do something completely creative that had a huge impact on the community. With our parade, we had our traditional parade in downtown LA, and the city was always fantastic with us down there. But we're really a South Bay, historically a South Bay team, and that goes back to our years in Inglewood as well. And we had the first parade across the beach cities that went from Redondo to Hermosa to Manhattan. And it was the first time where all three different municipalities had to work together to actually allow us to traverse across their city, and all three police forces had to combine to put that together. And that came together in a matter of weeks, or a matter of a week, I think, really, working with the city of Redondo really first, and cutting all that red tape and making it happen. So those types of things, I think, Christian, to the point you brought up there, they have a huge community impact in the long run. And it really it's having that relationship with the city. And then, when we can give back to the city in any way possible, and we've done it with Alan and Beach Life, where, we've made a commitment to the first Beach Life that ultimately is going to put a new skate park in Redondo because of our commitment to Beach Life. Like those types of relationships are really beneficial for us. We had some great presence with the Kings at Beach Life, but ultimately it was all about having a community impact in the long run. And, I think we're hopefully, going to break ground on that skate park here in Redondo here soon.
So I want to go, thank you. I want to go back to something that a couple people touched on, but Drew more specifically, innovation, right? I think sometimes in the public sector, right, we are not necessarily being innovative, right? We're dealing with status quo thinking. We're dealing with just policies that have been ingrained and set, and so it really requires individuals to think outside the box, to be willing to go someplace that they haven't gone before. So talk to me, whether you're elected or in the private sector, about the existing public barriers to innovation, and or the differences in goals to get to a final realized project or a solution. What do we need to do? How do we create a revolution as opposed to a evolution?
Well, let me try and tackle that.
Sure.
I think that the first thing that you have to do before you can be entrepreneurial is that you have to disabuse yourself of the notion that cities don't make money. We don't usually have an enterprise orientation when we manage our cities. One of the things that when I came to town, we had no money. And every street that we had to renovate, and all of them needed renovation, we would lay fiber optic tubing with no fiber. And the public works guy said, "Why are we doing this?" I said, "We're going to ring the city." I said, "Because one day we're going to lay fiber, but it'll be much faster than the broadband stuff right now." And come to fruition, we now have the entire city ringed and with dark fiber, and we've picked an ISP provider, and we're going to have our own. As I helped finance the South Bay to do the same thing just recently, and we'll be able to provide low cost broadband services for our low-income families. We'll be able to provide lower cost internet connectivity to businesses that migrate here. And so, but you don't do that if you think that making money is something that private businesses do. We have a contract with a media company. They build, construct, and populate full motion video billboards in the city. They're built for free. We derive between 50 and 80% of the revenue. And before we had the Rams and everybody, it was like, everybody said, "Well, why are you doing that?" Now it's a gold mine. So what I'm saying is we need to think like entrepreneurs. And that's very important.
Who wants to go next here? Drew? No?
I would say.
I saw Alan. Alan took himself off mic.
Are you looking at my mute button? You know what? One thing that I've learned in business is really how I operate, but I'm learning more and more in the public world that we need to celebrate it more is trust and confidence in each other. And you know, in business, I'm a big fan of a philosophy called tit for tat philosophy and treating people right. And in business, we build relationships over time. And if the cities now could go to the people, you know, like to Kelly, I'm going to give you a pat on the back, but a guy like Kelly Cheeseman that's proven over and over that he cares about the community, it makes it easier for a city or an entity to say, okay, we're going to trust you guys. Go build the rink out there and you guys are going to do it the right way. Because just as much as the cities have to give good entrepreneurs the leeway to innovate and to do new things, you also got to be careful that there's always bad actors out there, right? And so kind of doubling down on the people that have proven themselves in the community, people that you have trust and confidence in, and giving those guys a little bit of a leash to say, okay, go think of something new, make the city money, to what Mayor Butts is saying. Don't just try to, you know, maximize your income, but also bring some money back to the city, because that's going to float back around. We're going to lift all, you know, rising tide raises all ships. But I think there's plenty of entrepreneurs out there. So I don't think there's any dearth of innovation. I just think you got to let the dams open a little bit more. And in the past, what I've seen is a hesitation on the city's side to, it's kind of like a no-win situation, right? But now COVID has forced the dams open to where things like, you know, some businesses have temporary use permits that have expanded their premises. Well, maybe now's the time to see if those become permanent or semi-permanent. There's a lot of stuff that can be done, but nothing can be done without the trust and confidence that people that are ingrained in the community have built. And I think if the city government start to trade on that, you're going to see a really nice increase in innovation and in performance.
Well, Kristen, don't you think to a certain degree that our concept that we're all these discrete entities and not interconnected economically, I think that's serves us ill. That's why I would never call El Segundo a sleepy place, ever, because they have a component that we don't have. Other cities around us have hotels that we don't have. So Inglewood actually is going to be a center. It's going to displace downtown as a center for entertainment and sports activity. Well, we can't accommodate all the things that people want. So the South Bay actually becomes now a more homogeneous economic entity. And I think we serve ourselves ill by not thinking of it that way. Like when I talked to the COG about our fiber optic loop, the COG wanted to do it. I was on the Metro board. I got them $4.6 million, saying under the rubric that it was an enhancement for telecommuting. It could take cars off the road. And then they got that done faster than we did. They went live before we did. So one of the things about being on all these boards that I'm on, it's really given me appreciation for the interconnectedness of all of us. And that's something that I think cities have missed in the past. Everybody's thinking about their budget and their town.
Mayor Butts. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan. I was
No, I was going
just
to say. Well, I was going to say that Mayor Butts brings up an interesting point about governance and how it affects decision making. So there's something really good about having just in LA County, 88 different cities all looking at their own self-interest, which gives a lot of local control. But I think at the same time, it does some of the synergies between cities is lost because of that. And also it creates a provincialism in certain cities that bogs down and creates bureaucracies. And it's hard to move big regional ideas forward that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I was just going to say that I completely agree, and it's one of the reasons why I spend so much of my time and energy at the COG level, because I feel like, to Alan's point earlier, right, rising tides, when we're all working on the same things, it doesn't make sense for us to all be working in silos. There is such fluidity. I'm sure it's that way in various other COGs, but to me, I'm in El Segundo at least once a day, when my kids are at school, or like we are all moving in and around each other's communities and interacting, and we eat in each other's towns. We go to entertainment in each other's towns. So Drew, you were talking about innovation, and I know you not only as an elected official but as an entrepreneurial person. From your perspective, as a mayor in El Segundo, where can going back to that initial question of the public barriers to innovation, what can we be doing, whether it's at that local or sub-regional level, to overcome those barriers?
Effectively discard democracy, go to dictatorship. No, in all seriousness, I was in China recently, before COVID, obviously. The stuff they get away with. I mean, they wanted to build a railway. They put it through an apartment building and took out 3 floors. I mean, it's just, so I think for us, we're risk averse, which is the exact opposite of the entrepreneurial mindset. So it's always been very frustrating for me in local government, encouraging staff to get to yes, stop putting up the no barriers, which is so common with staff bureaucrats, and get to yes faster. And how do we actually measure whether or not we're doing that in our city? Using things like Net Promoter Score, which is a common methodology with business, asking people, how likely do you recommend El Segundo as a place to live? How likely are you to recommend us as a place to do business? And then following up with people on their qualitative comments. So I think it's a slow process. I think COVID will help. But I'm working on a project right now, and a little shameless plug, Jim knows this. I told him, Mayor Butts and Christian, you as well, I want to build a wave pool. I probably told all of you guys on this call. I've been working on it for 3 years. It's 30 acres. It's very capital intensive, like on the size of Top Golf in terms of money required. How many cities do you think are like raising their hand? Not that many. Now, I do have a couple cities where I've met with council members and stuff, and they can embrace the idea, but they want to make sure that they're protected. So if that thing fails, they're not going to have egg on their face. And I think that's the biggest barrier, is that we want to get reelected, and we don't want to make, I can think of, there's actually a timepiece in our city and a parking lot that both still get associated with the previous mayor. No one wants that legacy, if you will. And so how do you get over that? I'm not quite sure. I think it's, taking some calculated risks. Certainly you want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and I don't know. I really haven't figured it out yet. I think we're getting there, but I think part of it is starting with the culture so that the staff understands, don't just throw up roadblocks. Help this developer get this project done faster. I mean, Kelly, when your ice rink outside, that hit a hurdle, right? And so you had to put in a call, and we had to, influence staff, like, come on, this is ridiculous. Let's get this done. It shouldn't be that way. And that staff should, I think, be looking for the opportunities to get to yes faster. So
weeks, months, years lost on these projects ultimately impact the revenue that the city is going to generate on these projects. I mean, an example of a project, Luke and I have been working on since 2015 now. The city of LA came to us with an outstanding opportunity. There was Prop K funds put into the city coffers in the mid 90s to build an ice rink in a very specific district of the Valley, in Reseda. And Councilmember Blumenfield came to Luke and I and said, "Hey, I found this money that is in my district." And for whatever reason, in the mid 90s, right, probably when Luke and Wayne were battling for the Stanley Cup at that point, it was identified that it can only be used to build an ice rink. Well, it was, I think, $7 million at that point, which is not nearly enough money to do it. So we needed the city and us to come together, and he said, "Hey, do you guys want to be partners on it?" And we were like, "Yes, absolutely." I mean, Drew, we've been trying to build more sheets in El Segundo for a long time, or in the South Bay. And if we would do that in a heartbeat, but it takes a little bit of partnership. The moral of the story on this one is it's 2021. That rink's still not done. We think we're going to get it done in this fall of 22. It's to no fault of the council member, who is, his district, his residents of his district, the people and residents around where the area of Reseda that's going to get revitalized have been begging for it to get done. But the red tape and bureaucracy of going through it and, unleashing some additional funds has really delayed it by years. Luckily, we've been here and we will be here. We'll be here for the next 50 years is our intent. But I'm not sure every, entrepreneur would have that patience going through it. So, to Drew's point, finding the way to unleash the partnerships. There's a lot of us in town, small and big, that would invest to make the cities better and ultimately, put more money into the coffers of the city if we can get it done.
Mayor Butts, go ahead.
I'm going to talk about something that's going to reach Jason and piggybacks on Drew. I spent 37 years in public safety. My master's in business. I have an MBA from Cal Poly. The totality of my orientation is captured in these words: a sense of urgency, be nimble, be responsive. And so that's the way I approach government. We have managed to get people elected to the council that, because of their background or orientation, they also believe in those words. As a result, we haven't had a vote that wasn't unanimous, I think, in like 6 years. Now, people that are going to invest money, they look at the behavior of councils, particularly when it comes to votes on things that have an impact on the speed of planning reviews, of economic development issues. They look at those. Nobody's going to come and risk $1 billion in a place where you don't know where that third vote is one day to the next. It's not going to happen. I take emails myself. I convinced the Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles, 35,000 strong, to move their headquarters from Marina Del Rey to a building in Inglewood, a quarter mile from City Hall. Convinced the LA Phil to move their youth orchestra program from East LA to a building we bought right across the alley from City Hall. And the reason people do this and invest $15 million to renovate a building, the Girl Scouts spent $4.6 million on a property that 3 years prior sold for $1 million, is because they knew we were going to help them finish their building so they could get their grants. Now, I just got an email from the lady running it. Said, what she said? She said that they couldn't get their plans approved fast enough for the last edition, and they were going to time out on a grant they had. I sent an email to the planning director, the city manager, say, hey, we need to get this done today. And I just had the thing pop up right now, and we're on it. And that's the way government is supposed to be. We don't have to be slow. We don't have to be bureaucratic. But in the way our cities are structured, everything flows through the city manager. The city manager is the knower of all things. And most of us come into the business depending wholly on the city manager. His or her orientation is going to determine whether or not you have a bureaucracy. When Jason needs something, he didn't call the city manager, he calls me. Because I've been in this business 48 years. I know how all the departments work. I know about fiefdoms and kingdoms. And I believe that's why we work. I mean, Jason can give you his impression because he's been in St. Louis, he's been here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Mr. Mayor, you make a really important point, and I touched on it earlier in my initial remarks, which is obviously the trust in that relationship with your elected officials and your leaders in the city is so important. I mean, for us, as we go and we talk to people both, throughout the country, globally, but also locally, they want to know if I spend some money to develop this concept, if I spend money on the front end, am I going to get a fair shake? Am I going to be able to see this through? Is there going to be a lot of really unnecessary hurdles to go through this process to be a part of the city of Inglewood or Hollywood Park? And, our track record in terms of developing is, although short relative to the big picture, we have a tremendous track record in terms of our relationship with the city and working through issues and having a really pro-business minded city government and Mr. Mayor that has really allowed us to be able to talk with confidence to our prospective partners and hopefully future tenants and citizens of Inglewood that, like pro-development, pro-business, we'll get stuff done. And I think that's so important for us to be able to go out and include that into our marketing efforts.
And Drew, you may have said tongue in cheek, but a benevolent dictatorship is the best way to run an aggressive, on the move city.
So that leads me to we got about 5 minutes left. My final question, even though I had tons more here. So let's now transition that into the community, right? The residents portion. And I want to start with Alan Pullman because you come from a design perspective, right? And you mentioned Long Beach and, one of our speakers today, John Keisler, who is your economic development director. I know you guys have created specific plans throughout Long Beach, right, to address the different communities because they're unique in their own ways. How do we bring the community into that? Because I am an elected official in a community that is right now very divided in many ways as it relates to the intersection between private and public. And to the point of like what you guys have mentioned about making major investments, right? Sometimes the community is looking at that as being bad, right? The big money people, and that's bad, and we don't want that here. So, how do we find that kind of common ground? How do we bring the community along, and how do we create a certain amount of equity and buy-in to the community? I'll start with Alan Pullman.
Well, I wish I had the magic pill I could give to all of you, because I think that's really one of the biggest issues we have. We do have so much divisiveness about things like land use, for instance, and people don't understand that there is this business of cities. Cities have to be in business. They have to attract businesses to their cities, or else it'll go someplace else. I think that in Long Beach, we struggle with that too. And I'm working in Torrance right now. I have a project in Redondo Beach. I think it takes leadership. It takes leadership from the electeds to really put out a vision and lead people a little bit. I think if you just, as a leader, just weigh in, just like do everything on a consensus basis and just see where the population overall is, you probably won't do anything. It'll be a muddle. So there has to be some sort of level of leadership, I believe, from electeds into what the vision of the city is going to be. And I do think that we do a lot of outreach. There's a lot of community meetings. Those are even better now with Zoom because there's more participation, but it still takes leadership to make decisions. And I think that that actually can help move the dial with the population.
Alan, you are so on point about that leadership. The unfortunate thing about elected office is that the qualifications are virtually non-existent to be over 21 and not convicted of a felony. And so you end up getting a potpourri of people. A lot of people, the first time that someone had to know their name, the first time that people paid attention to them was when they got elected. And they have no concept or vision. And so if you need money to be elected, unions, police unions, Democratic committees, and so on and so forth, you come into the business thinking that your whole deal is to maintain those constituency support. What you're in the business for is to use your background, intelligence, analytical ability to do what's best for the greater good, the greater number of people. And unfortunately, like in council meetings, the loudest, squeakiest wheels get an undue share of attention because they have this homeowners group or what have you. And that's not what you're elected to do. You're elected. You're elected by a majority of people. And they elected you because they thought you had good sense. And so that doesn't mean you don't listen, but you were elected to lead. And so that word leadership is so profound. Drew's a businessman. I know that. I knew that as soon as I met him. We clicked like boom right away. The first time any elected official from El Segundo ever came to the city of Inglewood to meet with the mayor was when Drew came over with the city manager's public works person and said, hey, let's talk about how we do things. That's what your responsibility is. But we don't have a school for elected officials that tell them that it isn't just public safety, it isn't just infrastructure renewal, it's creating a climate so that your city's sustainable. That's why we're in the situation, we have these PERS pensions that are unsustainable, but we don't have a countervailing plan, strategy to figure out how we're going to fund them. And we just like roll through these offices and, well, you know, somewhere down the road, somebody will figure it out. And that's a problem.
So I want to go just a couple minutes over to let anybody else weigh in. Alan, I saw you unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Mayor Butts, what you just said, I would challenge the mayors in the cities, the city council guys. I truly think there should, I should be reading in the paper that there's recovery committees starting with mayors from multiple cities. And I'll be honest, I deal with 4 city councils very normally, and a lot of them don't have your experience, your guys' experience, and don't have your entrepreneurial nature. And maybe it's more of the city governments talking together. I was always dumbfounded when I was building these parklets that all the cities weren't talking. Nobody was talking about hydrology studies, and it flubbed me. And Christian, to your credit, I built the summer concert series in Hermosa Beach for a decade down there, was trying to do beach life, couldn't get one person to go out on a limb. You guys saw the potential of it, and $7 million of economics goes over to you guys, right? I hope that the city councils become a little bit more entrepreneurial, like you guys are saying, but perhaps there's a way for city councils and for mayors to talk more, and there's more forums and recovery committees, because I think if that feeling starts to become the pervading nature of the city councils, then we get out of the no-win situation where, as Drew said, people are just afraid to make decisions. They're afraid to enable the entrepreneurs to do new things. That would be wonderful to see. Because I think there's a line of entrepreneurs like Kelly, like myself, like people that want to invest in the cities. There's no dearth of that.
I think music to my ears was hearing Drew talk a little bit about like net promoter score and surveying and consistently surveying. I mean, the residents of your city as their customers. I mean, I'm as successful as the customers coming through the gates of our arenas on an annual basis, and their happiness is not completely built on what's happening on the field and on the ice. Of course, that's critical, but they need to have a great experience, and the residents of the city are invested as anybody. So, Christian, I don't want to go into any in depth into the failures of where we're at in Redondo and the bureaucracy of the projects that we've had here, other than I live 3/4 of a mile from the pier and I hope it gets done here at some point. But I think that failed because there wasn't enough input on the early stage of getting, a true feedback loop put in from the residents of the city, that also explains to them the give and take of what needs to happen. And it just went to no, and then some very controversial ways that the votes go down. And at that point, it's done. And then we're a decade later and nothing's happened. And I've seen it happen in different ways in different cities, and I think we can get it done if we take it in a different direction, the way Drew's explained, or the way that Mayor Butts is talking about.
Jason or Drew, you want to wrap up, or?
I just want to tell Mr. Sanford that, remind him that El Segundo has a beach. I don't know why we weren't considered. I'm sure we can work a better deal. We should talk.
We'll come together then, Drew.
Exactly. No, thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks for having me as well, and can't wait to welcome everybody to SoFi and Hollywood Park here in the near future.
You're about to stay in the city of Inglewood, Jason.
In the city of Inglewood.
All right.
Yeah, taking the metro to the Inglewood Transit Corridor.
Exactly.
That's
There
right.
you go.
And if Mayor Butts and I have anything to do with it, we'll eventually have a 1-ticket ride from the South Bay. Right?
Exactly.
But listen, I just want to say thank you to each of you for taking time out of your day to be here. Clearly, like I said, we could probably go on and on with this conversation. I appreciate each of your unique perspectives and participating in this General Assembly. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.